All right, everyone, let's find our seats. Welcome back. Today, we are going to open our notebooks to a very specific and I think often misunderstood chapter of history.
A really overlooked one.
Totally. We're zooming in on the calendar pages of November and December 1939.
Right. Because when we talk about World War II, the narrative tends to jump, doesn't it?
It does. We covered the invasion of Poland in September, and then boom, we fast forward all the way to the spring of 1940.
To the invasion of France is the standard textbook skip.
Exactly. We treat the months in between as if they were just an intermission, a time when the world just kind of hit the pause button.
But it wasn't a pause.
Not at all. And that's what I want to challenge today, because if we look closely at this window, specifically November 1st to December 31st, we see a paradox.
A massive contradiction.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were standing in London or Paris during these 2 months, the war felt, it felt theoretical, quiet.
Sure.
But if you were shivering in the forests of Finland or sailing the South Atlantic, the war was visceral, it was violent, and it was terrifyingly real.
And that's the theme for today, the illusion of calm. We have this period where war is declared, the major powers have mobilized, but on the main stage, Western Europe, the guns are silent.
But in the shadows, on the periphery, the map of the world is being violently redrawn. We're going to look at 3 distinct theaters today.
Okay.
First, that strange paralysis on the Western Front. Second, the explosion of violence up in the frozen north. And third, the deadly cat-and-mouse game happening on the high seas.
So let's start with the West. Poland has fallen by early October. Britain and France are technically at war with Germany. But then...
Nothing.
The silence.
A deafening silence. This is the period that gets dubbed the Phoney War.
Right. The Sitzkrieg, as the Germans called it.
The sitting war. It really paints a picture, doesn't it? You have millions of men in uniform, weapons loaded, just sitting there.
So why? Why wasn't there an immediate clash?
Well, it wasn't laziness. It was a stalemate born of trauma. You have to remember, the generals in command, especially the French and British, they were all veterans of World War I.
They remembered the trenches.
They remembered the Somme. They remembered Verdun. They were terrified of repeating that kind of industrial slaughter. So their strategy wasn't to attack, it was to survive.
So they were trying not to lose rather than trying to win.
Precisely. And that defensive mindset, it manifested in concrete. We have to talk about the Maginot Line.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a trench. I mean, this was an engineering marvel. We're talking about massive fortifications, underground bunkers with air conditioning, electric trains.
Cinemas even.
Cinemas, hospitals, everything. The French army basically parked themselves inside this fortress and said, come and get us.
And on the other side, you've got the Germans behind their Siegfried Line.
Which is a really interesting contrast. Because while the Maginot Line was a genuine superfortress, the Siegfried Line in late 1939 was... well, it was largely a bluff.
A bluff.
Yeah. It wasn't nearly as finished or as strong as German propaganda claimed. But the bluff worked. It spooked the Allies.
They just saw the pictures of the tank traps and assumed it was impenetrable.
They decided it was suicidal to attack. And so you have this Phoney War. It was a morale disaster for the troops.
I bet. Just sitting in the mud.
Digging ditches, playing cards, drinking cheap wine. The troops started to wonder if there was even going to be a real war.
Well, while the Allies were bored, the Germans were busy.
Very busy. This quote-unquote calm was a gift to the German army. They used these months to analyze the Polish campaign, fix their tanks, drill new tactics. It wasn't peace. It was a logistical timeout.
It's fascinating how doing nothing can be the most consequential action of all.
It really is.
Now, before we move to the parts of the world where the war was very much active, I just want to take a brief pause. If you are enjoying this video, please watch it until the end. It helps the channel a lot and encourages us to continue our work.
It really does help us keep these sessions going.
Okay, so let's pivot. We are leaving the muddy, quiet trenches of France and heading east and north. Because while the West was paralyzed, the Soviet Union was making some big moves.
This is where we see the fallout of that pact made between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. They'd secretly agreed to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence.
Right. Hitler took his half of Poland.
And now, in November and December, Stalin came to collect his share. His eyes were on the Baltic States, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania.
And this wasn't a military conquest, not at first.
No, it was a masterclass in coercion. Stalin summoned the leaders of these small nations and presented them with mutual assistance treaties.
Which sounds friendly, but I'm guessing it wasn't.
It was a threat wrapped in diplomatic language, basically.
Okay.
Allow the Red Army to place military bases on your soil or we will invade you.
And they had no choice.
They were small nations, no allies. They were terrified. So in late 1939, they capitulated. The Red Army marched in without firing a single shot.
So the independence of the Baltics was just suffocating.
It was, but then Stalin turns to Finland and tries the same playbook. He demanded territory, naval bases.
Yep.
He assumed the Finns would fold just like the others.
But the Finns said no.
They refused. And that refusal triggered the main event of late 1939. On November 30th, the Soviet Union invaded Finland.
The Winter War. And just looking at the numbers, this should have been a complete massacre.
Oh, it's the ultimate David versus Goliath story. The Red Army had millions of men, thousands of tanks, total air superiority. Finland had a tiny army of reservists and almost no anti-tank weapons.
Stalin must have thought it would be over in days.
2 weeks. He planned for a 2-week campaign. He even sent marching bands with the invasion force to play victory music in Helsinki.
That is just incredible arrogance.
It was pure hubris. And it met a brutal reality. The Soviets attacked in the dead of winter. Their tanks got stuck on narrow forest roads. Their soldiers wore dark uniforms that were perfect targets against the white snow.
And the Finns were in their element.
Completely. They were fighting for survival. They were on skis, wore white camouflage. There were ghosts in the snow. They used guerrilla tactics to just terrorize the Soviet columns.
This is where we hear about the Mahdi tactics, right?
Yes. Mahdi is finished for a log of firewood. The tactic was to let a long Soviet column stretch out on a road, then attack the front and back to trap them.
Cutting them off.
And then they'd slice the column to smaller, isolated segments, chopping the wood, and destroy them piece by piece. It was terrifying for the Soviet conscripts.
Just freezing in a forest, waiting to be picked off.
It was an absolute nightmare. Poor logistics, terrible morale. And then there was the Mannerheim Line.
The Finnish defensive line.
Right. It wasn't a concrete fortress like the Maginot Line, but it was brilliantly built into the lakes and forests. Throughout December, the Finns held that line against wave after wave of human wave assaults.
So while the West is staring at itself, the Red Army is being completely humiliated in the North.
Thousands of Soviet soldiers were dying every single day, and it shocked the world. But more importantly, it shocked Hitler. He was watching this very closely.
He was scouting his future enemy.
Exactly. He saw the Red Army struggling against this tiny nation and concluded that the Soviet Union was weak. A colossus with feet of clay, he called it.
And that overconfidence, born in December 1939,
would lead him to disastrously underestimate the Soviets just a couple of years later.
So the calm in the West was masking this huge geopolitical shift. All right, let's move to our third theater. We've done land, let's go to the water. Because the Phoney War definitely did not apply to the Atlantic Ocean.
No, the Battle of the Atlantic was hot from day one. In late 1939, Germany's strategy was simple. Strangle Great Britain.
Britain is an island. It needs imports to survive.
Food, oil, raw materials, it all comes by ship. And the German weapon of choice was the U-boat.
The submarine?
They were hunting in wolf packs, sinking merchant ships, laying mines. The goal was to cut that lifeline. If the ships don't get through, Britain starves.
But it wasn't just submarines. There were surface raiders, too. Which brings us to one of the most dramatic stories of December 1939, the Battle of the River Plate.
This one plays out like a movie script. The villain of the piece is the German ship Admiral Graf Spee.
Now, this is often called a pocket battleship. What does that actually mean?
It's a clever name for a loophole. Germany was limited in the size of ships they could build by treaty. So they built a ship on a cruiser's hull, but packed it with massive battleship-sized guns.
So it was faster than anything that could outgun it.
And it could outgun anything that was faster. A perfect predator. For weeks, the Graf Spee had been roaming the South Atlantic, sinking ships and just vanishing. It was a ghost.
But the British were hunting it.
They were. On December 13th, a British Commodore named Henry Harwood guessed correctly where it would be.
Off the coast of South America.
Off the River Plate, between Uruguay and Argentina. And so you get the first major naval battle of the war.
And the British are outgunned.
Seriously outgunned. 3 British cruisers against the Graf Spee's massive 11-inch guns. But the British attacked anyway.
It turned into a brawl.
A ferocious one. The Graf Spee just hammered the British ships, but they were like terriers. They kept rushing in, firing, retreating, and they managed to do critical damage.
Not enough to sink it.
No, but they damaged its fuel processing system. The German captain, Hans Langsdorff, realized he couldn't make the long voyage back home.
So he ran for cover.
Into the neutral port of Montevideo, Uruguay. And this is where the battle shifts from artillery to diplomacy.
Right, because under international law, you can't just stay there.
You get 72 hours for emergency repairs. The British diplomats are publicly demanding the ship be kicked out.
Yeah.
But privately, the British Navy was terrified. They didn't have any big ships nearby.
If the Graf Spee sailed out, it could probably finish them off.
Exactly. So they had to bluff. A massive bluff. British intelligence started leaking fake radio signals, creating this illusion that a huge British fleet was waiting just over the horizon.
And Captain Langsdorff bought it.
He did. He sat in that harbor, looking at his damaged ship, believing he was trapped. The decision was his. He was an honorable man. He didn't want to sacrifice his crew in a hopeless battle.
So on December 17th, the deadline is up.
The whole world is watching. Crowds are lined up along the harbor. The Graf Spee sails out. But it doesn't turn toward the British ships. It stops. The crew gets off, and then won it. A series of massive explosions.
He scuttled it, sank his own ship.
He did. It settled into the mud, burning for days, a huge propaganda victory for Britain. And tragically, Captain Langsdorff took his own life 3 days later. He saved his crew, but felt he'd failed his country.
So as we wrap up 1939, we have these three completely contrasting pictures.
We really do.
In the West, you have the Phoney War, soldiers bored in their bunkers. In the North, the Winter War, with the Red Army bleeding out in the snow. And in the Atlantic, the burning wreck of the Graf Spee.
Just dismantles that whole idea that this was a quiet time. The illusion of calm in the West was just that, an illusion.
And if we look at the date, December 31st, 1939, what's the mindset of the Allies?
That's the tragedy. They celebrated New Year's thinking, hey, we survived. Maybe this won't be so bad. Maybe the blockade will work. They were lulled into a false sense of security.
While the gears of total war were locking into place.
Exactly. The Germans were finalizing their invasion plans. The Soviets were learning brutal lessons that would make them stronger. The U-boat fleet was growing. The calm was actually the fuse burning down.
It's a powerful lesson. We look for the big explosions in history, but sometimes the most critical moments are the quiet ones.
Inaction is a form of action. And in this case, that inaction gave the aggressors the one thing they needed most: time.
A sobering thought to end on. The Phoney War wasn't phony at all. It was the deep breath before the plunge.
And the world would feel the full weight of that plunge in the spring of 1940.
Well, thank you. That wraps up our look at the end of 1939. It's been quite a journey.
It certainly puts a different perspective on those quiet months.
Thank you all for your attention. Before you go, if viewers enjoyed the video, they can subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell to be notified about new videos, click the like button, and share the video with their colleagues, as this helps us maintain the channel. Thank you.